Hello and welcome to the video. Today we are doing a very overdue tutorial from me, and that is how to photograph architecture. Specifically, we're talking about commercial work where you're photographing residential properties and you're probably going to get paid for it. Now, if you're new here, my name is Harvey. I'm actually an architect, but I am pretty handy with a camera as well. So you can see how I've combined my two passions and I've specialized in architectural photography. So to get this video started and to give you a little bit of reassurance that I know what I'm talking about, here's a selection of my favorite images. Now, the venue today is called The Grain Store, which is in Lewes in East Sussex. And it's an absolute coincidence that I found this place. I was literally out on the South Downs at sunrise making a YouTube video, and the owner of this place, Annie, was out walking her dog. And she said, "Ben, you should come and check out this project that I've just finished restoring. I think you'll like it." And here we are today. Ever since then, I've been providing Annie with some social media content for her business. So the reason why I'm here today, first of all, I'm making a tutorial, and secondly, it's very rare to get a good looking building which is both presentable on the inside and outside. Too many times if you're appointed by an estate agent to photograph a property, it's going to be unfurnished, just finished, and it's lacking character. It's very soulless to photograph an empty building without furniture and people. So when an opportunity like this comes along, I jump at it. Now, this video is concentrating on the photography of architecture, but I'm going to make a follow-up video where I show you how to make video walkthroughs of real estate. Right, let's talk about gear, because everybody likes camera equipment, don't they? Right, this is typical what I bring to a photo shoot. First of all, I've got the camera with a wide angle lens. This one is a 16-28. Most lenses are 16-35. Don't stress about getting the fast version of this, the 2.8, because for architectural photography, most of the time, you'll have your camera on a tripod and you'll be shooting at f8 or f11. Therefore, you've paid lots of money for this expensive glass and you're just lugging around a lot of weight unnecessarily. That's the camera. I have a backup camera just in case this one fails or I get too much dust on the sensor and I can't fix it on location. So I'm shooting with the Sony A7 III and then the Sony A7 IV that's filming me there. Next up, a broad range lens. So typically that would be a 24-70, 24-105, or this one is the new Sony 20-70, and that's f4. So this is kind of bridging the gap between a wide angle lens and it's got a medium telephoto. So that's a really good all-round lens. Next up, we've got a 24mm tilt shift lens. And the reason that this is Canon is because Sony don't make one. So I have to adapt my Canon lens onto my Sony body. Tilt shift lenses are much better for exterior work. However, I do still shoot interiors when I've got a good size space. So I'll get on to which lenses I prefer in a second. And then the final lens I've got here is the 55mm f1.8. You could easily do with a 50mm 1.8, or if you've got a bit more space in the camera bag, maybe a 100mm macro. And this is what I would consider my detailed shots lens, where you get nice, soft, diffuse backgrounds, and it's kind of really detailed focus shots. So there you go. I've been to this property before, so I kind of knew what I was up against. Sometimes you may have to bring more gear than you'd really want to, but this is what I typically bring to a photo shoot. As well as the camera, I bring a couple of accessories. So of course I would have a good sturdy tripod, and then I have cleaning cloths. I use a spirit level. There are a few other little knickknacks, but generally cameras, lenses, tripods. In terms of lighting, now depending on how big or small the space is, lighting is very difficult, and I can make a completely separate video about that. But I have made a complete tutorial on using artificial light, so I'll put the link up here. But essentially, if you were trying to light a space this big, you would need a very powerful light. So if you're just starting out in real estate photography, what I'd say is rely upon natural light and the lights that you have inside the property. So the one thing that you do need to be careful of is the shift in white balance. Now, in the middle of the day, the sun outside is going to be a cool blue color. It's referred to as Kelvin, and it might be something like 5,000 Kelvin. So as you can see here at the moment, I am lit by the window light here, but these are very warm lights in the background. So you can see that there's this clash of white balance. So if you're using artificial light, that is some of the challenges you're going to face. You need to match the color temperature of the ambient light. So if you're just starting out, what I would recommend is just work with the natural light, and if it's not working in your favor, if possible, come back at a different time of day when that room might be lit up better. Most new properties have cool to warmer LEDs, so you can switch those on and they balance quite well with natural light coming in through the windows. If you know what you're doing and you can use artificial light, then you can bounce a flash off a wall, providing that that wall is not a certain color. Alternatively, you could use the studio light and you can use gels to kind of match color. But then it starts to get a bit complicated. If you want to know more about artificial lighting, I'll put a link to my tutorial up here. Okay, now let's talk about lens choice. At the moment, I'm filming this on a 20mm f1.8 lens, and this does have a wide angle look to it, but of course, if you ever looked at any estate agent's photographs, you can go much, much wider. So let me show you what that looks like, and then you can make a decision whether or not you should stay away from it. I have now switched to a wide angle lens, and then I'm going to go out to 16mm. So when it comes to photographing architecture, if you use a really wide angle lens, what that does is it increases the perspective of the floor, which makes it look like the floor is ramping up, and then it increases the perspective of the roof. So what you do is you get this really exaggerated tunnel, and it just looks like the floor is kind of ramping up, but we all know floors are typically flat. So even when I put my hands out here like this, look how distorted my hands are. Put my hands up here, it's fine. Turn my hands around like this and they become horrendously distorted. So you just need to be careful when you use wide angle lenses. I have to use wide angle lenses in smaller spaces, but if you're photographing a property like this, I probably wouldn't use the wide angle lens. So if you can, I would just avoid shooting really, really wide. It can look a bit estate agenty, and I don't mean that in a really bad way. I just mean it doesn't accurately reflect the size of the space. So first of all, it's a bit deceiving, but it's generally considered acceptable. The second thing I see in a lot of estate agents' photographs is HDR. Now, this property has got a stunning view, and if Annie said, oh, I need some photographs from the interior and I need to see the view and I need a blue sky, then sometimes you'll just meet the limitations of your camera and you will need to bracket because you're not going to use filters in that situation. So there's no problem in bracketing images and then blending them together. However, I see so many photographs which are just completely over the top HDR, and it just doesn't look right at all. So just be careful with the edits. My approach is always to get a very natural look. The windows should be brighter than the interior. That's where the light source is coming from. So just look at the balance of the highlights and the shadows and just make sure that it looks correct. Right, let me give you a few other tips and tricks which are fundamental to architectural photography. The first rule, I mean, it is a rule, it's not even up for grabs. Your photographs must be vertical. Vertical, vertical, vertical. When I look at architectural photographs, if the image is not completely straight, that's the first sign of an amateur. Either perfectly vertical or at a completely deliberate abstract angle, okay? They're the two rules. So here's an example using a wide angle lens, and I was using the door frame to frame up my composition of the bedroom. Now you can see here with a wide angle, it's even more exaggerated. If you tilt the camera down or up, verticals start to get really crazy, and it's called keystoning. Now, to some extent, you can fix this in Photoshop afterwards. However, you're throwing away pixels. So ideally, you just get it right in camera. And again, a tilt shift lens is going to help with this. Regarding the basics of focusing and exposing, architectural photography is a very manual process. So I'm using manual focus, and I'm just zooming in on the back of my camera, say 10 times, just making sure that I'm nailing focus on my focal point. Broadly, if you're shooting at f8 or f11, the majority of your scene is in focus, but use manual focus. Secondly, if you're photographing a white room, that's going to confuse your camera's metering system. So typically, if you're shooting bright, airy rooms such as this, you're going to have to overexpose your photographs according to the metering of your camera. Okay, let's talk about the process. So the first thing I do when I turn up at a property that I'm photographing is give myself a quick tour. That way I can get an understanding of the scale of the property, how long I've got, work around the light, these sorts of things. So let me give you a quick tour of this property, and then we can make a judgment on how long we should spend on each of the spaces. So the first thing, you enter this property and you've got a side door there. You come around here. This is a lovely entrance with some retaining sleepers. I probably wouldn't photograph this, so I would just go to the front entrance. Okay, so once you enter, you've got beautiful utility space, leads out into the front garden, and then here, which is where I've been filming the video so far, you've got this beautiful open plan dining, living and kitchen space with an island. So I could see if this was a photo shoot, which it is today, I could spend a lot of my time in this space. Let's see what we've got elsewhere. As you walk through here, you've got one bedroom, good sized bathroom in here, shower screen there, and you've got a vaulted ceiling again, which is letting in some beautiful light up here. Really, really nice finish on the bathroom, so I could see myself spending quite a bit of time photographing the bathrooms. We've got another double bedroom here, and then through here is a self-contained studio. So there's another very generous bathroom out here. So you've got your own private garden there. Mezzanine space up there. So this is the self-contained studio at the end of the building. Okay, and I'm back to the main building now. And there is a mezzanine up above the main building here. So at the moment I've spent most of my time down there. And then as you come up here, you can really appreciate the original concrete structure that we've got here. There we go, we've got twin room. Over here, we've got a lovely family area that leads out onto the terrace. This reminds me, to give you an idea of how nestled this is into the South Downs, I'll show you my version of this photograph. So one of the struggles we'll come up against, I was here at sunrise this morning, and that's east, so the sunrise was blasting through the skylights and the windows in the studio. And if you had your own choice, what you would essentially do is work your way around the building based upon the natural light. In that instance, I did actually take some photographs with the harsh spots of light on the bed, and it doesn't really work. Some of you may like that, but I don't. I think any highlight in the photograph is going to draw the viewer's attention, and you don't want to do that. You want to control their attention. So I then closed all of the blinds, and then I took the same photograph. It's much softer, much nicer to look at, but it's lacking detail. So ideally, if you've got plenty of time, you would essentially photograph one part of the building when the sun is not directly in that room, and then as time passes and the sun has moved around, you could just return back to that side of the building. So when it comes to shooting exteriors, I am completely dictated by the weather. If you don't have any choice and you've got a small window of opportunity to photograph a building, then obviously you just have to make do with what you're given. But if you've got the choice, keep an eye on the weather, obviously, then I would photograph a building in the first few hours of the day, sunrise, sunset. In the summer, that's obviously very unsociable hours, but I've had to do that here. And then I'll be staying here until gone sunset to get some twilight shots this evening. If you ever work on a building which has ugly setting, now that is definitely not the case here, but if you're photographing a skyscraper and it's surrounded by some less attractive buildings, photographing it at twilight really hides that, because you can control the lights on your building. Hopefully the sky will have like a royal blue tone to it, and then everybody will just look at your building because the lights are on and it will be the focal point. So ideally you always want some direct sunlight, whether that's diffused through some clouds or whatever the weather. You want the sun to be in your favor and therefore lighting up the facade. I'll use this building right here as an example. The sun is currently over there, and this building is kind of backlit now. So you can't photograph this building in the summer at sunrise or sunset. You just have to work with what you're given. But you can see here, because of the contrast, there is no direct sunlight on this part of the building at this time of the day, which I knew, but I'm having to photograph this at my available time. Now I'm just going to start photographing this space, and I've switched off all of the lights. I'll tell you why. If I switch these on and switch these on, you can see that this is creating an exposure problem. Now this is overexposed, so if I turn down the ISO on this, that's correctly exposed, but you can see how dark that makes the foreground. Sure, you can edit these things. You could lift up the exposure of the shadows and things like that. However, this is more of a contrasty scene now. But if I turn these lights off, Because I'm on a tripod, it doesn't make a difference. So I've switched the lights off. I've got more even lighting now. It's the same color temperature, and I just do a slightly longer exposure, much easier. All right, so one of the benefits of using a tilt shift lens, I'll show you what my camera is seeing. Okay, so let's just say this is my composition. Let's just say I can't move the tripod any lower. And the tripod is actually at the correct height, but you can see here, I'm not particularly comfortable with the fact that I have chopped off the stools, the breakfast stools. So using a tilt shift lens, what I can do now is I can lower the lens, essentially, which pushes the perspective up and down. I'm not moving the height of the camera, I am literally shifting the lens up and down, so I can do that. I can move the tripod backwards, forwards, change the height of the tripod. Alternatively, I can shift the lens up and down. So this is what camera movements are all about, and it allows you to fix some of these perspective problems. Let me tell you about my thought process. First of all, as I'm going around a property, I am looking for single point perspectives, which means that I'm photographing things straight on. So therefore, I am parallel with the back wall of that kitchen, and therefore I'm parallel with this kitchen island. This is what's referred to as single point perspective, because everything is vanishing to one single point in the middle of the frame. If I photograph the kitchen at a slight angle, there are actually now 2 points of perspective. There are 2 vanishing points. This creates a more dynamic image, so I would typically photograph both of them. And then you probably want to mix that up with both landscape and portrait compositions. Okay, so I'm photographing this scene here, which is a vertical composition. Another benefit of the tilt shift lens, which I can show you live here, I tend to set my camera at the midpoint of the floor to ceiling so that the perspective is balanced. Therefore, the camera is halfway between the floor and the ceiling. So even if you do shoot wide, the floor and the ceiling will be kind of equal perspective. But let's just say, for example, that there is a really interesting ceiling, but the floor here is not very interesting. Then you can use a tilt shift lens to show more of the ceiling, therefore emphasizing the ceiling. Alternatively, that's neutral position. Or if you just had, say, lots of fire alarms or something that you didn't want in the frame, then you can drop this and emphasize the floor more than the ceiling. Right, another tip, don't feel obliged to fit absolutely everything in the frame. So for example, I'm photographing this bed here. People can join up the dots. You don't have to include the entire bed. You can show half a bed or 2/3 of a bed, and people can join up the dots and say, okay, that's clearly a bedroom. So don't feel obliged to shoot wider just to include the entire object. The same goes for bathrooms. You just need to include a little bit of the bath or a little bit of the shower for people to go, okay, that ensuite clearly has a shower, a toilet, a bidet, a basin. Now, to reduce the amount of lens swapping, what I tend to do is go around the property, shooting, what I'm doing right now is 24mm tilt shift, going around the property, keeping the camera on the tripod, switching between landscape, portrait, and then just shooting everything at 24mm. Then what I'll do is I'll go around with a wide angle lens, just in case I think, okay, there's a different perspective, maybe I could benefit from a wide angle lens on this shot. Then once I've done the entire property, then what I'll do is I'll put the detail lens on, and then I'll kind of just zoom in and I'll start just to get those little details that I might have missed. I am really running out of light now. I reckon it's about half an hour off sunset, plus it's really overcast anyway, so this is not the ideal conditions. Plus I'm a little bit rushed because I am making both a tutorial and trying to take photographs of this house. Now, I haven't actually had enough time to photograph everything here, such as this hot tub. Broadly speaking, I've been shooting at f8 to f11. I've had the camera on a tripod the whole time, and I'm looking to shoot at ISO 100. And then the shutter speed is kind of irrelevant because there are no moving elements to the photograph. So I've actually been taking photographs up to about 5 or 10 seconds just to keep my ISO down to 100 for nice clean images. Now, when I'm framing up my compositions, I'm making sure that I don't have any distracting elements around the edge of the frame. It's called edge patrol, or there are loads of different names for it, but just make sure you're not just snapping away happily without actually checking your compositions. So once you've taken the photograph, press play on your camera, zoom in, make sure that there are no distracting elements and everything is in focus. Another helpful tip, there are instances where your reflection will end up in the photograph. This includes like a toilet flush plate, sinks, mirrors, shower screens, the oven door, all of these things create very strong reflections. So if you wear darker clothing, you're a lot less likely to end up in the reflections. Right, it's been a long day and that felt like a bit of a rush. Maybe I shouldn't have tried to photograph it and make a tutorial at the same time, but hey, love a challenge. Okay, if you want to find out more about the Grain Store, I'll put a link in the top of the description below. Their website contains booking information as well as a bit of history about the building. If you've got any questions, then let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and I'll see you in the next video.